I could not be more excited to be bringing episode 4 of Accounting Conversations to you this week. I got to speak with Mike Manalac for this week's episode, and Mike is just amazing. He is an accounting manager at Google. He's interviewed at places like Uber, Pandora, Facebook, and he previously worked at Walmart. Me and Mike go specifically through how young accounting professionals can structure their careers to land their dream job later down the road. Mike is so knowledgeable and was so kind in sharing his experiences and his expertise with me, and I really hope that you enjoy all the tips and tricks that he shares as well. Make sure to check out his book, No Flux Given, where he goes through guiding young accounting professionals through their careers. And make sure you check out his website. Those will all be linked in the description below. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate all the feedback I've gotten so far, and please continue to share the podcast with your friends and with your fellow accounting students. So please enjoy this episode 4 of Accounting Conversations. So excited to have you. Hey everyone, welcome back to episode 4 of Accounting Conversations. I'm so pumped for today's episode. Today, I'm joined by Mike Manalac, an accounting manager at Google and the author of the playbook No Flux Given, which is a playbook catered specifically so accounting students and young accounting professionals can land their dream job. Mike, I'm so excited to have you on today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, no, great to be here, Chayton. Good to finally talk to you and get to reach some of your audience too. And I didn't realize I was episode number 4, so I guess by the end of today I'll be top 5 no matter what. So no, excited to be here and happy to talk about whatever you think will be valuable for your audience.
Yeah. So I just got done reading most of your playbook, and I'm excited to talk about that. But, I think a lot of accounting students wonder what it might be like to work at Google. So do you want to get into maybe a little bit about what it's like working there, and then we can go back and go over how you got there?
Yeah, sure. A little more background. I think you touched on some of it, but I'm an accounting manager at Google. Lead a team of 5. It's a distributed team, so some of us sit here in Chicago, which is where I'm located in the West Loop, but have people in Austin, Texas, and in LA, and things like that too. So, been managing the team or I've been at Google for close to 7 years, managing the team for close to 5. What's unique about working at a company like Google, specifically the things I work on are Google search and YouTube ads and the different contracts we have with our top advertisers. So, that's not necessarily always something you learn in a textbook or unless you audit clients in Big Four that are in big tech, then you probably don't see that side of it either. So it's fun for me because I'm obviously a user of a lot of the Google products, and to be able to work on it becomes more tangible and more relevant, knowing that I'm not, doing some audit of insurance when I really have no interest in insurance companies and things like that. I very much am interested in big tech and the different products that Google has. So one, I think it's just the relevance and my interest in the products that we offer, I think goes a long way. And that helps being, in your fulfillment of your career too. The other interesting side of it too, like probably the perks and things are pretty well documented. I know even big tech now, which is very different than big tech 5 years ago. I mean, the perks are pretty amazing. The free lunches and the creative spaces and the things like that. Like we could talk about that. I think most people know or have heard a lot about that stuff, but the people that it attracts, I think is really interesting and one of my favorite parts. And I know people always say it's about the people and your coworkers, but it draws a certain type of creative professional to a company like Google, and that applies to like the finance side too, and all the accounting folks. So I really do feel like I work side by side with a ton of creative people that are bursting with good ideas. A lot of them, my first day walking through, I was looking around and everyone's in the accounting floors, like coding in SQL, like writing scripts and things, which I wouldn't have expected from an accountant. And we do all kind of creative projects and things like that. So that I find very appealing, and that's true at Google, probably true at a lot of other big tech companies and other high profile companies too. But I love that aspect of it, and I think what I maybe enjoy the most is that a lot of the situations I'm in day to day, I am representing the accounting team, but I'm really talking with other people from legal or compliance or engineers or sales teams or FP&A. So I'm very much part of a broader cross-functional team, which I feel like is different than what you'll get maybe in public accounting, where you're in an audit room with a bunch of other auditors. And you may not even talk to the people that do the tax engagement for that same client, right? So it's very cool to be able to work with different people in different practice areas. So, and then working on the deals that I touch with big name companies like a Netflix or a Nike or Coca-Cola. That makes it a little more fun too, because these are brands that I also know and love. So uh, I don't know if that answers a ton of the ins and outs of it, but there's the operational side of accounting. There's the booking the entries, closing the books side of accounting that we can talk to as well. But that's probably maybe less than 25% of my day to day. The 75% is process improvement and automation and building out internal controls and partnering with different teams. So hopefully that's a decent glimpse into in what my like a typical day would look like for me.
Well, and look at how exciting that is. That's not just sitting crunching debits and credits every single day. You're getting to really get to know Google's business and interact with all parts of the business while being an accounting student. And I feel like that doesn't get talked about enough. I think you had a post a couple weeks ago about how if you want to break into Hollywood, if you want to break into Silicon Valley, wherever you want to end up, if you study accounting, it's going to be way easier to break into that way than just trying to become an actor or become some tech genius, because I'm definitely not that. But accounting is really kind of the back door into any industry or company you want to work at.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong, and it's not the common path, but it definitely exists in all sorts of different flavors. But the one that you'll hear is usually, well, are you audit or are you tax? And then it kind of stops there. Nobody asks, do you want to open up your
Yeah.
own practice? Do you want to do government stuff? Do you want to be on the private industry side, startup, like Hollywood? Things like that exist that eventually you say, oh, yeah, I guess they do need an accountant over there. But you don't hear about it a lot. So a lot of the things I try to highlight are the things that you don't hear about, because I think everything that the public accounting, the big four route, audit, tax, busy season, the 150, the shortage, a lot of that stuff you hear about all the time, which is fine. Like I definitely love talking about that stuff too, but you have to show all sides of it. Otherwise, you're painting a very small picture of what the profession is. And honestly, that does a disservice, I think, to students that, are maybe looking at it like, oh, that's what accounting is, because they have a very limited view, because what their impression is based off of is just a handful of the same people talking about the same stuff. So I love that you're bringing on people to talk about different routes that you can take, and maybe opinions that and point of views, perspectives that you don't hear every day.
Yeah, I think that's the goal of the podcast. And I forgot to mention how active you are on social media in promoting these bright sides of the profession, because you are one of the top voices in the accounting industry right now, really bringing out those bright spots, which is how I found you and was able to interact with you. And is what has partially gotten me so excited about my career in accounting. So I appreciate you bringing the good side out of accounting and the good things that can come from even the hard years in public accounting, and bringing those to light so that students can see that there really is a big value add in getting an accounting degree.
Yeah, there's no, thank you for saying that. And for the most part, like I'm kind of just having fun and sharing that side that doesn't get discussed a lot. So if other people are picking it up and liking it, and even if it helps or somebody learns something, or maybe it inspires them to take a risk they wouldn't have otherwise taken. Uh, when I was coming up, I didn't have a ton of those outside perspectives, and there's really no excuse today that you shouldn't be able to hear from all sides of the accounting profession. But very nice of you to say that. Thank you, Chayton.
Right. Yeah. The resources we have today are amazing, and we need to take advantage of them. So kind of going back to those accounting issues you mentioned, the 150-hour rule, the shortage, students not studying accounting anymore. Um, you cover a big way that students can solve those problems for themselves in your guidebook, No Flux Given. Do you want to go through maybe a little bit of why you wrote that, and then we can dive into maybe some of the simple frameworks that you go through in there to help students land their dream job?
Yeah, sure. So if you're a student and maybe you haven't been through public accounting, maybe this will be news to you. But the common accountant's path is usually you graduate, you go into public accounting, you stay for however many years, and I think timing is a big part of what I talk about in the book too. And then usually you say, okay, I've had enough of the busy seasons. Only 2% actually stay and make partner. So 98% are not doing that, right? Where are they going? That's usually when they move over to the private industry side, which is like working in the corporate accounting side of a company internally, and that's like my role now at Google. Or you do other things like start your own practice or go into the government accounting, things like that. But for the most part, that's the path most people go: college, public accounting, and then into industry or into something else. And that's kind of where they drop off and you don't really hear from them. So most of the people you're hearing from are, I mean, it's mid-February, man. Like the point of view, the perspectives you're hearing from accountants today are deep in the trenches of busy season, burning the midnight oil, 80-hour weeks. So you catch them on any day in the first quarter of the year, they're probably going to have some choice words to say about accounting. And I think what usually happens is you do that for a while and you start to say, look, the value proposition no longer makes sense. Either I'm not making enough money for the amount of hours I'm putting in, or I don't get to see my family, and all those kind of things start to weigh on you. I mean, that's the classic burnout that you hear about a lot. And then people usually say, okay, I'm going to leave. What are my exit opportunities? And a lot of people will kind of tell you throughout college, like I bet your professors are singing the praises of Big Four and the path to the promised land if you land with the Big Four and things like that, as if that's the only path, right? But and you do that and you can get any job you want. I started out in a top 20 firm before going to PWC with Big Four, but even doing close to 8 or 9 busy seasons with a top firm, the exit opportunities that I felt like I was kind of promised all those years, get any job you want when you leave, it's not actually that easy. Even though I think a lot of people talk about it like it is very easy. And so what I found when I was trying to leave was I wasn't actually getting the attention of the companies that I wanted. A lot of companies would say like, oh, well, you want to come join, I don't know, I'm from Baltimore. A big employer there is Under Armour. That was for a moment there like what I thought could be the pinnacle of where I would exit into. And to be honest, Under Armour wants people that came from Big Four and then worked at Nike or Adidas. They didn't really want me that did financial services audit at a top 20 firm. And then I realized, but some people are working in these roles. Like, what did they do? And I started to look up backgrounds of the people that are in these internal accounting roles. And that's when I started to say, okay, I'm seeing trends here, all the different things that I didn't have. And it almost became like a career checklist for me of things that I wanted to go check off my list so that I could get the attention of these big companies. Um, but when I looked around, there wasn't any resources. There wasn't a here's how you can leave public accounting and land your dream job book. And if there was, it wasn't from somebody that had interviewed at the Ubers and Amazons and Nike and Google and Tesla and Salesforce and all of those companies. Those people, maybe they existed, but they're not out there talking about it, and they're certainly not writing a book to help somebody that was in their shoes multiple years ago. So I kind of carved my own path, and I think that's a hard thing to do. But after I did it, through a lot of failures, moved across the country to kind of make some of this come to fruition. But through those failures, you learn a little bit. With every failure, every disappointment, you get back on the horse, you figure out something out that does work. And then by the time that I did make it into Google and was successful at Google and was promoted to manage a team at Google, and all I hear about online is all the bad mouthing of the accounting profession and how they're not creative or tech forward, how the work is boring and you're not making any money. It kind of made me feel like, look, that might be your perspective, but it's not my perspective. And I'm going to put something out there, and maybe it'll help other people see the fun and fulfilling side of accounting. And it may be a smaller corner of the accounting space, but it's not impossible. It's not like it's out of reach for people. And nobody ever referred me into these companies. I didn't go to a fancy college. I didn't come from money or anything like that. The doors weren't wide open for me, and yet I still was able to get in. And I felt like, look, I figured a lot of things out through that process, and I'm gonna try and pay it forward to students, like a lot of people that are probably in your audience, to say, look, I know I hear a lot of bad mouthing, but then I also hear a few other things like this that are pretty encouraging, right? So that's sort of why I put out the playbook. And I was getting a lot of questions of, hey, any tips for me? How can I do that? And eventually I just packaged it all together and put it out. So hopefully that's a little background about how the No Flux Given playbook came to be.
Yeah, I love that. And, in reading the playbook, I think the thing that stood out to me more than anything is I'd never read a self-help book before that one had the exact framework of how you could land a job at a certain place. But you also moved from the East Coast to Silicon Valley, to San Francisco, and you were going and getting in front of these companies all the time. You were trying to land that big job, and you go through every single one of those interviews that you did in your book. I mean, you went to Uber, you went across the bridge to Oakland and interviewed with Pandora. You interviewed with Facebook, three different times?
Yeah.
You interviewed with Salesforce. Was Salesforce Tower there back then?
It was being built.
Is that where you interviewed at?
They have a bunch of buildings, so it was the one down the street from the new tower. But
Okay.
but yeah, right downtown, right at their HQ sort of quad of buildings that they have.
Yeah, so I mean, all those companies, you ended up interviewing with Tesla and Uber, and being able to see your breakdown of each of those interviews is so beneficial as a student. And, I'd never read anything like this before. You break down how to market yourself, how to set up your LinkedIn so that recruiters are going to want to talk to you, how to reach out to recruiters, how to set up the phone interviews, all of it. And it's the perfect playbook for a student who wants to land that big job someday. And I think you also bring hope in that if you go land a job at a, top 20 big four a public accounting firm, you can leverage that to get a job that allows you to have the work-life balance and the pay that you want. And you can go and do these cool things and get on the cool campuses where they have free lunches and they have, I I was just reading the part where you talked about how you felt like you were in a different world when you walked into Facebook's campus, how it feels, completely different. I don't think these are things that when you're sitting in financial accounting, you're thinking you could get there, right? But
Yeah.
your book brings that to life and makes that possible. So I really appreciate that. So kind of getting in the weeds here with that, how would you best recommend that students start out? So your framework, how does it start?
So I kind of kick off the book explaining. I mentioned you go from college to public to industry. I break down each of those in phases to go through the good, the bad, and the ugly to give the real picture of what you're going to see. Go through is the grass greener and the timing of those jumps too. Don't stay too short. Don't stay too long or too little, too long. And then what do you do while you're there? Because I think a lot of times what I found out was that if I was like spending close to a decade in audit, I was doing a lot of repeat clients. Um, but was I really utilizing everything while I was there? I probably should have diversified the clients I was working on. I should have thought about what industry do I want to exit into? Those are the clients I should be auditing, and how can I touch different aspects of what's available within my job today. So it's not all about leaving your job. A lot of it is what do you do in those phases that lay that groundwork? Because I think to your point, there's a lot of steps, and I think a lot of people think maybe it's impossible or why try. So I really go through every little phase basically to demystify the fact that like, hey, it's just a process like anything else. And if you break it into little pieces, one step at a time, you can get there. So I kind of start off with what it's like going through the different what you could do when you're in college and trying to land like say a big four internship just to really say that you did Big Four, because you may not exit into Big Four when you graduate, or to study abroad if you could, or to get into the data side of things more in your college time, and then when you're in public accounting to work on, like I said, the type of clients that interest you. Because if you're working on stuff that's not interesting to you, that's not really going to benefit you down the road, right? So really thinking
No.
about I'm not just doing this to collect a paycheck. I'm doing this so that later I can say, hey, I know what I don't like and I know what I do like. Now that I know what I do like, let me go get it, for myself. So go through that a lot in the public accounting phase, because I still think starting out at a firm is the right way to do it. Not the only way to do it. I feel like a lot of times people are thinking like, oh, well, you talk a lot about the negatives of the profession, and a lot of it that is in public accounting. Well, that's just because I'm real. I'm not trying to hide anything. Like there are pros just as much as there are cons, and I'm not gonna hide from those things. Um, but then I get into the public accounting, and why I mentioned timing is so important there is because when you do leave from public accounting to go to industry, a lot of people don't realize there's job bans and length of time that people are looking for. Like if you want to go for a senior accounting role, when I interviewed at Salesforce, they only required 2 to 3 years for senior accounting. When I interviewed at Amazon, it was like 5, 6 years of accounting. And then, so let's say you stay until maybe you're a 8 year senior or something like that, and then you try to go to the Amazon job or to the Salesforce job, and they're going to say, "Sorry, bud, you missed your time frame." So a lot of people don't think about that you can actually stay too long, and that extra experience, depending what you really want to do, could come back and hurt you. So I talk a lot about the timing of the jumps, which I think is important, and obviously getting your CPA. I know there's plenty of nobody's going to tell you that's easy. It's a pain in the butt. It's a pain in the butt, and for a reason. It's hard, and I think people acknowledge that it's hard, and then they look at you as somebody who can do hard things, and you're rewarded through that throughout your career. So um, I get into that a little bit of as far as like how to think about public accounting, and then it gets really interesting with thinking about industry and going for that job. Because to your point, I had so many applications, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. You fill out your resume on the career page and you refresh your email. When am I going to hear back? You never hear back. You never hear back. And that's not because you're not good, even though it does. It's a blow to your ego. How come they don't want me, right? Like, so I went different routes of contacting the recruiters on LinkedIn that are recruiting for the accounting departments, or trying to get it in a different way. And once you get that in and you have a connection, then you can strike a conversation up, right? Then you're not at the bottom of the stack of the resumes. You're kind of having a live conversation. And then really being ready for prime time. Because once you get them to say, hey, Chayton, what are you all about? Boom, they're asking for your resume. Next day, phone screen. So you really have to have all those things planned out. That's like, okay, when they ask for my resume, I'm not going to say, oh, let me go dust off my old resume from Microsoft Word. Like, you got to have that ready to go. It's got to be good. You got to be ready for that phone screen. And then I mentioned this for a few different things with like Twitter and a couple other companies, where if you don't act fast and strike while the iron is hot, you had a little ember of a flame with this recruiter. If you don't capitalize on it while it's hot, like, that's going to disappear. That flame's going to go out. And then before you know it, that hot lead goes cold. So you really got to move fast. You got to move strong. And that kind of starts with getting the attention of the recruiter, then the phone screen, the different types of things you say on the phone screen, and then moving on to the on-site interview, where I go through the gatekeepers, being the hiring manager, and what they're doing behind the scenes, and the different people you're meeting with them, and during the on-site. And then the final round, which is like, you made it this far, what's the final round going to be like? And then the waiting game of hearing back. So I really do try to go end to end on all of those. And I think in total, I cover 15 interviews from those companies that you named, and probably a few more that we haven't talked about. But there's similarities for each, there's differences for each. And I end each of those like debriefs of how the interview went down with like a handful of key lessons. And I think you put all those key lessons together, and maybe you don't have to go fail all those interviews like I did to learn those things, right? You can learn from some of my successes and my losses as well, which it took me a couple years to get to that point where I could even cobble together all those things to say, you know what, I'm getting a little bit of a formula that's working here. If I repeat this, I'm starting to get success. I'm starting to get callbacks. I'm starting to get multiple offers. And the end product is the No Flux Given playbook. So I try to be as end to end as I can. Hopefully that comes across.
Yeah, the depth that you go into each interview and each experience is a huge value to students. And like you just said, if students, accounting students, or even young accounting professionals were to take the exact steps that you lay out and were to just plan, the next 6-7 years and lay it all out, they might be able to land their first job with their dream company, because you've already laid out the framework perfectly. And so there's a massive value in reading your book and following your playbook. And I hope my listeners go and check that out and, use it and put it to practice in building their dream accounting career. So I wanted to ask you one more thing here. Me and you both, I think, share the opinion that the future of the accounting industry is bright, right? For people who are getting their CPA right now or are studying accounting, there's going to be massive opportunities here in the future. Why do you feel all that way with so much, maybe negative talk towards the accounting profession?
Yeah, I guess one is I see the bright side maybe more than others of accounting, because that's my day-to-day role. But also, a lot of good comes with the shortage, and with a lot of students saying, I don't know that value proposition makes sense anymore. a lot of good comes from that because you kind of have an upper hand. It used to just be like, hey, just this is how it's always been done, just grind it out year after year. Whereas now I think the firms are saying, well, maybe I can give some more work-life balance with hybrid work or a remote work situation, or maybe I can reduce the hours. And you're seeing firms start to reduce the hours during busy season. You're seeing them start to be more flexible with remote arrangements. You're seeing them increase the pay. Now, there's a lot of catching up to do. So I think people are still saying, you know, that's not enough, or, things like that. But give it, let the situation breathe a little bit, because I think those little changes are all going to add up, and they're starting to add up now. And I think with 75% of the accounting profession being of a retirement age, that's going to cause amazing opportunities. Like, I think the age of the partner has now decreased by 5 years, and some of them are averaging around 33. That's pretty freaking young to be a partner, right?
Yeah.
So the eventually the old guard is going to move on, and that was pushing all of those old ways of doing things. And I think the younger generation of accounting workers are going to have a bigger say. They're going to be promoted up the ranks so that they're the young partner in the office. You get enough of that in your work environment, and things are really going to change. And I think so I'm very optimistic about that side of things. And the work is getting more interesting too, because a lot of the grunt work that nobody likes to do is becoming automated, or we're going to be able to leverage AI to help with a lot of the stuff that we didn't really want to do ourselves. So you start to take away a lot of the cons off the list, and the pros are there and kind of growing up, while the cons are starting to go down. So I feel like that's ripe for an opportunity. And uh, I would say that it's not going to be a day one, here's here's your golden ticket kind of thing. But for those who put in a little bit of time, because even for any good accounting role, they probably want a couple of years of experience a lot of times, which is unfortunate, because a lot of times you're saying, I'm trying to get this job so that I can get experience, and you're asking for 2 to 3 years experience or so. But I think for those that do stick it out and get their CPA, knowing that a lot of others are not, you're differentiating yourself even more. For those that do the hard work in public accounting, that's known to be hard, whereas a lot of other people maybe are taking an easier route, uh, you're going to benefit from others looking at you saying, look, this guy's not scared of a challenge, and he's okay to put in the hard work when it's needed. And then eventually you build up a reputation for doing good work. You show that you're not just trying to do the bare minimum. You can do a little bit more, while also maintaining like some boundaries for yourself, so you don't like burn out yourself. Um, but then things start to open up for you. They don't happen on day one, but they do happen a couple years in. And I think that's the big opportunity, because if you don't actually go a couple years into it, you're probably not going to, none of those benefits are probably going to materialize, because a lot of those jobs that are being outsourced, or the ones that might be replaced by AI, those are the ones that are like the intro type accounting service tasks, right? That are easy to outsource because they're pretty basic, or they're easier to automate. So you don't want to specialize in that stuff. You want to do that stuff and then start specializing in other areas, so that when you hear about people getting outsourced or AI taking their job, it's not your job they're taking, you know. But I do think the future is very bright. I just hope that others can see that, and then realize that, like, there's not necessarily going to be a big time shortcut. You're going to have to do some hard work, but I think that's a misconception about the younger generation too, is that they don't want to work, or they only want lazy girl jobs, or like to quiet quit like on day one. I think a lot of people want to work hard. They just don't want to get taken advantage of. And I think if you can find that right balance and do it the right way, and the firms are starting to accommodate that and find that right balance, and if the younger generation can continue to require that to be a part of the value proposition, then those doors are going to open a few years down the road. And I think the more that the retirees the old guard transitions out, the opportunities are just going to keep going up, and the con list is going to get shorter. So that's why I'm pretty bullish on the profession. I don't know, is any of that off base, Chayton, or does that resonate with you at all?
It's all right on point. I mean, I've considered changing the name of the podcast to the Golden Age of Accounting because I think
Oh,
that's what's right around the corner.
yeah.
I am just like you, super bullish on what's to come, and that's why I started this podcast because I'm so excited for what's to come in the accounting industry. Well, Mike, thank you so much. I really appreciate your wisdom, your grit, that all the things you've gone through, all the companies you've interviewed with, the bootstrapping that you've done in your career. It really has paid dividends, and I'm so glad that you're sharing that with so many students and so many young accounting professionals because they need it, right? Like, just like you were saying, when you started out, there wasn't a playbook that people could give you to show you how to do this. You went and figured it all out yourself. Um, so huge value in what you're sharing with the accounting community. So I really appreciate that. Do you want to share maybe with my listeners where they can find your playbook? And you also have some courses coming up, I think, right?
Yeah. You can find me on LinkedIn, Mike Manalac. Pretty active there. And then check out my website. It's mikefromaccounting.com. I put out a lot of my resources there. So the No Flux Given playbook is on there. The course I just launched, which is all about virtual collaboration, which is sort of meant to help young accounting and finance professionals thrive in this remote friendly work environment that we're in, and then also capitalize on the fact that AI is changing things, and how virtual collaboration and being able to lead a team in this new work environment is really going to be the new way of doing things. And AI is not going to take that job, and you're not going to learn it in a textbook. And unfortunately, leadership isn't teaching this stuff either. So that was another corner of the market that I kind of wanted to help on. So that course is out there. It's called Sketchy Business Practices, where I introduce a digital whiteboard and kind of get sketchy with some of the collaboration techniques that I have that I call the 5 elements. So check that out on mikefromaccounting.com. Any other hot takes? I kind of have like a password protected section of the site called the Vault. Feel free to check that out too. That's all free. But yeah, find me on mikefromaccounting.com. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Would be happy to interact with as many of your listeners as possible. And I'm looking forward to staying tuned to not just the first 4 episodes of this, the next 4 and the next 40 after that, because Chayton, you really are touching a perspective that isn't being shared, similar to the perspective that I'm saying isn't being shared from the industry accountant. We're hearing a lot of people talk about what Gen Z wants in the work environment. The problem is you're not hearing it from anyone in Gen Z or millennials. So I love that you're doing some of that, and I can't wait to see the rest of the guests and material that you guys have that you put out there in the weeks and months to come. So thank you for having me, Chayton.
Yeah, of course. I must be some weird accounting student that I love accounting and am looking forward to the future because there's not very many people doing stuff like I am.
Yeah.
But hey, thank you so much again. Really appreciate your content, your book, and coming on here and sharing your most valuable resource, your time with us today. So thank you. Thank you to everyone who's listening. Really appreciate you listening and would love to hear any feedback you have on the podcast so far. If you have any recommendations for guests or anything like that, let me know. And make sure to check out Mike's book, No Flux Given. It's an amazing playbook for accounting students. So make sure you go check that out. And thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.